Is Dungeon Quest dying? And that's a question that a lot of people probably are asking because the game is losing a lot of players. And before the video does begin, I'm not simply just gonna hate on Dungeon Quest, I'm gonna point out the obvious problems and issues and maybe even offer a few solutions towards the end. First, let's discuss the recent updates. So as most of us know, Dungeon Quest has been on a decline ever since the new group known as Voldex bought it from VCafe. And the issue with Voldex wasn't that they didn't care about the game, they did a lack of updates or lack of quality updates, it was how they did the updates and what they actually were. For example, a few months back they introduced the crafting system, which basically allows you to get these crystals and shards and you can eventually combine them to make this sword. And the sword that you would get would be the strongest sword, or I should say weapon, for your level. And on paper this update was fine and it was pretty cool for a while, but for people that were collecting legendaries to trade for other items, the value overnight just instantly plummeted. Because what's the point of trading away all of your valuable items for a top tier leg or legendary when you can just craft one yourself, which is going to be even stronger. And let's go even further back when they released Yokai Peak. And don't get me wrong, that dungeon was pretty good, but the problem with it was the power difference between war and mage users. Around that time period, everyone from Yokai Peak was using abilities from the GS dungeons, but more specifically, only war users were using GS spells. Because the Yokai war spells weren't really that good, the range wasn't that good, it just overall wasn't that good, but the mage spells were pretty good however. And overnight everyone wanted to become a mage user, and overnight the demand for EIF just skyrocketed. And the value of EIR just kept on dropping and dropping because no one really wanted it, and they should be equal because they are equal, they're made to be equal, but now that's completely changed. I'm sure if you try trading for EIF nowadays, they're gonna make you pay a EIR plus ads, and sometimes even more. I would actually say even more than that. It's just crazy nowadays. And now let's fast forward all the way back to now when they released the new dungeon, the meta, but more specifically, let's focus on the last few weeks. Voldex introduced a system where you can be AFK in Dungeon Quest and earn loot. And I think they realized that they're losing players, so they made an AFK system where people get rewarded a ton of loot so players stay in the game and play for longer. And another thing I want to mention is that they did increase the spawn rate for legendaries and just overall rare items. And for this it's the same reason, they do want to retain their players as much as possible, so they're basically just throwing away rare items at them hoping they will stay and play for longer. And eventually it's gonna get to a point where legendaries aren't really rare. Nowadays when I play a game, it's pretty common to see a legendary drop, but back in the day I could play 50-60 games and sometimes I wouldn't even see a legendary at all. And I can't make this up, just as I was recording, someone in my server dropped a legendary item, which just proves my point even more. So my message to Voldex would just be to add more quality updates, and by quality updates I just mean updates that the people want. And this would mean maybe adding an extra dungeon in a year, so instead of one dungeon maybe drop 2 dungeons, and that may be a task, but I do think you guys can do it because players just don't want to wait a full year for a new dungeon which they may or may not like. However, having an extra dungeon in there would help a lot, as even if players don't like it, they can expect a new dungeon just in 6 months. Anyway, that's my little rant about Dungeon Quest, and this again isn't just to hate on Dungeon Quest. I do hope the game does well. It's one of my favorite games and I've been playing since 2020, so I do hope it makes a 180 and comes back again. But at the moment it's not really looking good. The developers seem to be just trying to, respectfully cash out, as they're putting all the effort into these insane skins. Maybe they realize the game is dying so they're doing that, I don't know, but I still hope the game makes a 180, turns around, and yeah, make sure to comment and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Peace.